I'm Mark Wall, Principal Product Architect of Microsoft, and I'll be talking about our recent investments and updates to Microsoft Entra for identity governance. These identity governance features help organizations balance productivity and security across all their applications. Now, a key question many organizations struggle with is the effectiveness of their controls over who has access to sensitive data and other business-critical resources.
There are always more applications being built or being brought into the organization, and IT wants to ensure that people have the right access to those applications and to the data in them at the right time. But as we all know, IT budgets require that the staff do more with what they have, or even do more with less. In addition, they need to continue to ensure that their governance requirements, their risk management requirements, and their compliance requirements are met.
Manual processes often mean the IT burden increases as the number of apps or compliance requirements goes up. Most organizations' IT can't even keep up with the evolving, sophisticated attack landscape. Instead of just closing tickets for access, we've heard from customers that they need their IT to focus on setting guidelines, best practices, and preparing for the next scenarios. Identity governance provides a solution to help organizations get ahead of their access management challenges, stay secure, and meet their governance goals effectively. Through a combination of automation, delegation, and insights delivered by the identity governance features we'll be showing today, organizations can reduce their day-to-day IT burden and improve the effectiveness of their controls over who has access and when.
And while historically, identity governance products were seen as specialized technology, suitable only for large multinationals, today, these features are easy for schools, government agencies, and small businesses, as well as enterprises, to deploy quickly and start getting value. Check out some case studies for how some of our customers, state agencies like the Mississippi Division of Medicaid, financial service providers, and multinationals like Lumen Technologies, have been using these features at scale for employees and business partners accessing business-critical applications.
In this session, we'll walk through demos for how a typical organization, Woodgrove, might use Microsoft's identity governance features to address three common scenarios: automating employee onboarding and offboarding processes, using delegation to ensure oversight over who has access to applications, and reducing the risk associated with guests and other external users. Many of these features we're going to be looking at have been generally available for years. We've recently added several new features to help you bring more of your governance scenarios to run in the cloud. First, let's talk about how Woodgrove can automate employee onboarding and offboarding.
Now, we've all heard of situations where it takes a new employee a few days to ramp up and be productive. They need to get their computer, they need to get their credentials so they can sign in. Their manager needs to open a lot of tickets to have them added to groups and get the access to the apps they need. On the other end, for offboarding, when an employee leaves, residual access can be even worse. If the account doesn't get turned off, the access reduced or removed, this can introduce exposure because no one is monitoring those accounts.
Traditionally, organizations used on-premises identity management tools like MIM to automate these join, move, and leave employee lifecycle tasks, which made sense when the HR systems and the directories were also on-premises. As organizations are increasingly moving to cloud HR systems and cloud directories, we're bringing these automation scenarios to the cloud as well, so they're easier to deploy and manage. We're expanding the HR support to bring users into AD and Azure AD with additional APIs and interfaces for custom HR systems, and introducing Lifecycle workflows to help with the automation. Now let's take a look at the Entra Admin Center. Within the Admin Center, we'll see the capabilities of Azure Active Directory, as well as the new capabilities like Entra Permissions Management or Verified ID. We're going to start with Azure Active Directory. Within that, you'll see many of the familiar capabilities: users, applications, groups, devices, and so on. And you can see the same kind of visualization and data about those resources in the new portal. Now, if we look specifically at users, again, you can see the users that have been synchronized from your on-premises Active Directory, brought into Graph, created in cloud. You'll also have the users that are brought into Active Directory or Azure Active Directory from one or more of our HR integrations. We have an integration with Workday. You can bring in users from Workday into on-premises Active Directory or into Azure Active Directory and set their parameters. When is the user's account enabled? What is their department or other attributes can originate from that HR source. We also have a similar integration with SuccessFactors. We can use SuccessFactors to populate user accounts in Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, or both, and use the properties from SuccessFactors to set the attributes in the directory. Now, in addition to this, we're adding new capabilities in identity governance. In addition to familiar things like access packages and access reviews, we have a new capability of lifecycle workflows. The lifecycle workflows allow you to have additional tasks that run on key events for an employee's lifecycle, when they join, when they leave, as well as dates relative to these. Within Lifecycle Workflow Experience, you can configure one or more workflows. Each workflow will say what Azure AD should do to help automate, say, when there's a new employee, when they join a particular department, as well as events that happen before a scheduled event or after. Let's take a look at the new hire employee onboarding, where we have a workflow when people join. Within that workflow, we'll have a number of tasks. These are built-in capabilities that Azure AD can be configured to do automatically. Send welcome emails, generate authentication tokens, add people to groups and teams. And of course, we have a gallery of additional built-in tasks that you can do as well in order to customize the joiner experience to what you want to have Azure AD automate. In addition to the built-in tasks, you of course have extensions. We'll see some of that later on. These extensions can be used in order to, for example, call into a logic app during new employee onboarding to be able to perform additional operations. Here, for the employee onboarding, we'll do activities like calling into ServiceNow and opening tickets, and then using information from that ticket in order to then send an email. So you can easily compose one or more actions, not just in the directory service, but in other resources and other applications as part of the onboarding experience. Next, let's take a look at some of the other workflow capabilities in Lifecycle Workflows. In addition to being able to have actions that run when a new employee joins, you can also schedule activities before their date. In many cases, you might need to set up their accounts or set up other resources based on events of a couple days, a week, a month before the user is scheduled to start, be able to ensure that they have the right resources available to them. Now, of course, you also can go and see the history, what tasks ran for which users at what time, which were successful, if there were any failures. So you can go in and make sure that all the tasks that you're expecting to have automatically happen as users onboard or move or leave are run automatically. Now, in addition to scheduled onboarding, we of course have workflows with templates for the offboarding experience as well. You can do an on-demand that are triggered by, I need to have a task run immediately, as well as tasks that are triggered by changes coming out of an HR system, like those we mentioned earlier, for scheduled employee offboarding. In addition to being able to run a task when someone leaves, you can also schedule events to happen after the leave date as well. So here, for example, we've scheduled tasks that'll run 1 month afterwards. So you can send out various reminders, perform account cleanup, and make sure that users' access rights don't linger longer than is necessary. With these integrations with HR systems and Active Directory, and the ability to run workflow tasks, we can set up employees with user accounts in the directory. Now, how do we ensure that those users have the right access? Entra provides integration with thousands of applications. Through conditional access and single sign-on, you can centralize authentication for your apps. But many apps also have their own directories and databases, and with provisioning, you can centralize control of which users get accounts in these applications too. This includes not just SaaS apps, but apps that rely upon AD security groups or other LDAP directories or SQL databases to hold the attributes of their users. But IT often doesn't know who should have access or for how long to these business-critical apps. So in addition to automating the access lifecycle to the Entra Admin Center, PowerShell, and Graph APIs for entitlement management and access reviews, Woodgrove IT can delegate to people across the organization. Not only can they delegate the checks to approve requests or review access, they can also delegate to group owners, application team or site owners, the ability to configure policies for who can request, for multi-stage approval, separation of duties, time-limited access, and access reviews across all these resources. Let's go back to the Entra Admin Center. Within Entra Admin Center, we have identity governance. And here we're going to be taking a look at the entitlement management capabilities that allow organizations to delegate how people get access to resources and for how long. Within the entitlement management catalogs, you can set up delegation for different parts of your organization to be able to manage their own resources. So you could have catalogs per department, business unit, and so on. Each one can have their own people administering and establishing the policies for access. They can also bring in their own resources, and those could be SharePoint sites, groups, applications on premises using SQL databases, LDAP directories, AD security groups, as well as traditional cloud-based applications like SaaS applications. In addition to the resources, you can also define which roles people get in the different applications. So for example, in this application, we're going to give user a role if they're coming in as a sales executive. Other access packages might give different combination of roles for resources. Now, if you want to do more than just provision users into roles, you can use the custom extensions in order to perform additional tasks across many of these applications. So for example, if we are looking at onboarding sales executives, we might want to call into a SaaS application and perform additional tasks. Here we're using logic apps in order to make additional calls to not just provision a user, but make queries about them, update records, create tasks, and so on. And you can use logic apps for many other resources as well. Now the policies determine which users get access and for how long. We're adding automatic assignment so you can have access based on properties of the user. For example, their department or other attributes that are present in Azure Active Directory, perhaps synced in from a HR system. And those can be used to establish access without the user needing to request. Of course, if you have exceptions, people that need access but don't match that pattern, you can have policies for them as well. And policies for users to be able to request their own access. Those can be for people that are already in your directory, employees, vendors, and so on, or people that aren't even in your directory, people that need to come in, perhaps as part of a partnership or from a third-party organization you're working with in order to be able to request to get access they need. Each of these can go through multi-stage approval workflows with sponsors or managers as approvers are appropriate. In addition to approval, you can also configure in the policy how long users get access. You can set access to expire a particular date after a duration, or with recurring access reviews to ensure that users don't retain access longer than is normal. For this, you have a lot of flexibility to delegate which users decide who gets access and for how long. You can also establish separation of duties by declaring incompatibility between different combinations of access. So for example, the sales executive is incompatible with being in the sales data administrator. If I'm a sales executive and I go and try to request sales data administrators, that request won't go through. I'll be told that I have incompatible access based on the assignments I already have, and you would either need to change your access or request some other access package that has a compensating control so that the user's access combinations are permitted. Now, in addition to getting access and losing access, of course, you'll want to see reports on how users are using those applications and how they got access. So we have sign-in reports through Azure Monitor showing how users are signing into different applications, where they're signing in from, what devices they're using, which conditional access policies applied to their sign-in to ensure that you have oversight on how users are getting into applications. In addition, you'll need to see, well, how are users getting those assignments to applications? We have reports on how users receive their application role assignments, as well as all the actions that are leading up to access based on those access packages we saw earlier. So for example, who requested, who approved, when was the access provisioned, and so on is all available so you can go back and look at the report over time. And if we don't have the reports you're looking for, you can use the same query language as is used in Sentinel in order to build custom reports and dashboards to see the kinds of data on activities in identity governance that make sense for your organization and those that you need to show reports to.
With these features, you can automate the processes that ensure users have the right access across groups, sites, teams, on-premises, and cloud apps at the right time.
These users can be your employees, and entitlement management also supports guests. Guests typically aren't managed in an HR system, so we provide additional controls to help you manage the lifecycle of guests and their access. Some organizations might have structured collaboration. There might be many people from Woodgrove, Lidware, and other organizations working together on a project, and no one knows everyone in every other organization who needs access. Here, Woodgrove can use entitlement management to set a policy for users from Lidware or elsewhere to request access and, if approved, are invited in and assigned access. As people move between projects, they can request more access, but all this access is time limited, and those guests that came in that are no longer on any project and have no further need for access, their guest account can be removed.
Some organizations also enable their employees to have ad hoc collaboration. A Woodgrove employee knows somebody at another organization, let's say Litware, and invites them to join a team or contribute to documents on a SharePoint site. Now, in these situations, there might not be a well-defined project. So how does Woodgrove know how long to keep those guests?
Let's take a look at the Entra Admin Center. We have a number of different kinds of reviews of access packages, groups, apps, directory roles, and so on. Here, let's take a look at access reviews of guests and their access. You can have decision helpers to suggest to a reviewer who should or shouldn't have access. You can also scope reviews to only inactive guests. So in the reviewer experience, which you see here in My Access, we can ensure that they only need to review guests that haven't signed in recently, and they get the recommendation for which guests to deny. Now, in addition to being able to review guests in a group, you can also create access reviews of guests across all your Microsoft 365 groups, including Teams, that have guest users in it. You can, of course, exclude groups you don't want to review, and you can have the owners or the group members themselves do the review. Now, in addition, you also can do a review of specific teams or groups. And here you can review, for example, the guests that are for a particular partner organization, ZT. And in this review, you can ensure that when a review completes, not only can you take a user out of a group, you can remove the user's guest account entirely, ensuring that guests don't have access longer than is needed to any resources in the tenant. Now, in addition to being able to do reviews, we also have heard asked for how do I get the reports on how the reviews are going. So we've added review history. From this, you can download reports and use Excel or other tools in order to visualize what's going on in my reviews, who is performing the reviews, what kind of things are being reviewed, and present the information in a way that makes sense for your users, in addition to our graph and PowerShell interfaces, of course. With these and other identity governance features available today, you can now more effectively control access to all your applications and data for all your users with fewer manual steps, a smaller on-premises footprint, and more insights and reports. To get started, you can sign up for a free trial at the link on this slide to try out any of the features for your own applications, employees, and guests. Be sure to check out the documentation, which has getting started guides, APIs, and PowerShell samples, and links to customer case studies. Thank you.